The position of women in Hinduism and Buddhism. A rejoinder to an article published in EVS Weekly on 21st January 1950 under the title Our New Republic, Lama Govinda. Dr.B.R. Ambedkar. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, 1891 to 1956. Popularly known as Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, is one of the architects of modern India who made it what it is today, a secular, democratic republic. Born into a Dalit Mahar family in Mho, India, Ambedkar was constantly subjected to humiliation by high caste members of the society and school fellows. Impressed by his brilliance, the Gaikwar of Baroda awarded Ambedkar a scholarship. He studied at universities in the United States, Britain, and Germany. On his return to India, he was offered a job in Baroda Public Service but was ill-treated by his high caste colleagues, which made him quit the job and take up legal practice. In 1947, Ambedkar became the Law Minister of the Government of India. He was the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly and played a major role in shaping its democratic and secular nature of the Constitution. Ambedkar resigned as Law Minister in 1951, disappointed at his lack of influence in the government. In October 1956, in protest against the continued ill-treatment of Dalits by the upper caste Hindus, he renounced Hinduism and became a Buddhist. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was posthumously conferred the Bharat Ratna in 1990, India's highest civilian award. It is a well-documented fact that women in India have been relegated to the background in the matters of importance. Indian women have long been deprived of their volition, leaving them abjectly submissive to the will of their men. The life of women has been relatively better in Buddhist societies because of the higher moral values espoused by Buddhism. Yet, both the societies have produced great women irrespective what the two religions teach. In India, women were used to statecraft long before they ever did in Europe. The Ramayana and Mahabharata are full of instances of such women. These lines were prominently displayed in an article published in EVS Weekly on 21st January 1950 under the title Our New Republic. Does the learned author of the article hint at the fact that Draupadi, the chief female character of the Mahabharata, was gambled away by her husband, or rather husbands, because she had 5, or that Sita, who had heroically rejected all advances of her captor Ravana, was rewarded with distrust and doubts in her purity, put to the fire ordeal and banished into the jungle? If the position of women in those days had been what the writer of the above-mentioned article would have us believe, then we wonder why Draupadi had never been given a chance to gamble away her 5 husbands, or Sita an opportunity to send her calumniators and doubters on the pyre or into the woods. It certainly would have been more correct in this connection to say that the women of India in those times were used by statecraft. As to the women of Europe, I cannot say whether they were lagging behind their sisters in India in this respect, but I am quite sure that when some of them got an opportunity to meddle with statecraft, they were quick to make use of it. If Queen Elizabeth had been in the place of Draupadi, she would probably have executed her heir 5 husbands as she executed her unfortunate lover Lord Essex. But in my opinion, Draupadi without statecraft was more lovable a woman than Queen Bessie with all her political power and cunning. Another figure in European history who might have been mentioned with advantage is Empress Maria Theresa of Austria, who was both a loving mother of many children and an able ruler. And if we want to go into the earlier history of Europe, the Empress Theodora of Byzantium is perhaps the most striking example of a woman who rose from the lowest position to that of supreme power. She started as a prostitute and ended as an empress. I do not think that this would be the ideal of Indian womanhood. Just as I do not think that statecraft adds 1 inch to the dignity of a woman. Even if it were true that Indian women were used to statecraft long before they ever did in Europe. Our author apparently was not able to find any historically verified instances of an earlier period than the Rani of Jhansi and Dr.B.R, who both belong to the most recent epochs of India's history. But the most astonishing statement of the article under review is that it was, alas, the Buddhist theory that seems to have first thrust women into the background. What this theory is has unfortunately not been revealed by the learned author. And though I have scrutinized the Buddhist sacred texts and their teachings, I have found no special theory about women, but only about the human species in general. The Four Noble Truths, the formula of dependent origination, and the Eightfold Path of Liberation make no distinction between man and woman. All through Buddhist history, it was a special feature of Buddhist society that women had a far more favorable position than in most non-Buddhist countries. The fundamental equality of man and woman has been the lodestar of Buddhist society from its earliest beginnings. Anybody who has lived in Buddhist countries, be it Ceylon, Burma, Siam, Indochina, Tibet, knows that the status of women is astonishingly high. Because the Buddhist wife does not look up to her husband as to a god. She is not expected to eat after her husband has finished his meal, or to immolate herself after her husband's death as an alternative to a life of utter dejection and privation. On the contrary, she is free to leave her husband if she feels that she cannot live with him. And she does not become a social outcast after her husband's death, but can remarry if she desires so. Women may have their own affairs. In fact, in Burma as well as in Tibet, of which countries I can speak of my own experience, women are perfect equals of men, socially as well as in respect of business affairs. And they often show more enterprise and ability than men, who gladly leave these things to their womenfolk. Such a position of women in Buddhist society would hardly have been possible if, as the author of the article under review assert, the Buddha has a prejudice against women and was forever exhorting men to beware of them. To accuse the Buddha, who certainly was the most broad-minded, most liberal and tolerant of all the great teachers of the past, and who due to this was and still is revered far beyond the confines of India as no other of her sons. To accuse such a teacher of prejudice is certainly an extraordinary feat of misjudgment. If of all the great sages of India was only the Buddha who had a worldwide appeal, it was his complete lack of any prejudice. How otherwise could he be acclaimed and recognized as the enlightened one? The universality of his outlook and his deep understanding of human nature, irrespective of caste, color, or sex. It was he, in fact, who laid the foundations for the emancipation of women, who under the laws of Manu were in a very unfavorable position, as our learned author admits, thus contradicting his own previous statement that the Buddhists were the first to thrust women into the background. It was the Buddha who declared in unmistakable words that a woman has as great a chance to attain sainthood as a man. This attitude of early Buddhism is confirmed by the fact that the Buddha on one occasion refused an invitation from princes, because he had already accepted that of a courtesan. The princes were shocked that a frivolous woman like Amrapali should be thus honored by the Buddha and tried to dissuade him. But the Buddha stuck to his word, and Amrapali became one of his most praised woman disciples. If he had harbored any prejudice against women, here would have been the opportunity to show it. That the Buddha was forever exhorting men to beware of women is one of those half-truths which mislead those who have not taken the trouble to read the Buddha's words in their context. The Buddha did not exhort men in this case, but monks who had taken the vow of chastity in conformance with the ancient Indian sannyasi rule, accepted by Buddhists and Hindus alike. Nuns were equally exhorted to beware of men. The exhortation of the Buddha was therefore not due to a prejudice against women, but due to the knowledge of human weakness in men and women alike. Buddhist women were the first in India who made a substantial and independent contribution to the religious literature and who were recognized as equals to the best authors of their time. This is shown by the fact that the songs of the Buddhist sisters, under the title Therigatha, were given the honored position of canonical scriptures and thus placed beside the words of the Buddha and his most prominent disciples. Both Hinduism and Buddhism have produced great women. And instead of trying to find fault with the customs and teachings of the past and the sages, who proclaimed them in accordance with the needs of their time and the capacity of understanding of their hearers, we should strive to emulate those great souls among Indian women whose names have survived many a mighty empire, whose thoughts were higher than statecraft, and whose hearts greater than the power of monarchs. The figure of Savitri, whose profound love and wisdom vanquished even the king of death, will ever stand out as a symbol of the noblest qualities of womanhood. The voice of Maitreyi and Gargi are forever heard in the immortal dialogues of the Upanishads, and the songs of the saintly Buddhist sisters will live in the hearts of Indian women like the devotional songs of Mirabai and the heroism of Padmini. Source: Complete works of Dr.B.R. Ambedkar, published by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, the Government of India.